Hello children, so we meet again. I hope after the break you are happy. You got 10 minutes break, no? So shall we start? Okay. So what was the heading we were studying? Forms of prayer or the traditions of bhakti, isn't it? Okay. So, the historians of religion classified bhakti traditions into two broad categories, Saguna and Nirguna. This is what we were studying in the last class, isn't it? So, before that, let me tell you one thing. See, in the early form of Hinduism, that is, the Brahmins were the intermediaries between the God and the people, isn't it? Not only that, now also mostly in temples and all, it is like that. It is the Brahmins who are between us and the God. That is, we ask the Brahmins to or the priests to do something and they will do it. They will offer prayers for us to the God, isn't it? It's like that. But when this tantric worship or the bhakti movement came, it was not like that. See, many of the leaders who emerged in the bhakti movement, they were poets. Okay, with their songs, they became the leaders of this movement. Okay, for example, Kabir, Mira Bhai, etc. Mirabai was a singer, Kabir was a poet. Okay, so at that time, this bhakti traditions came in, was divided into two broad categories, that is Saguna and Nirguna. As I told you earlier, Saguna, in the Saguna form, what do we do? That is, we pray to God in, that is, there will be an idol or a picture so that we can talk to that idol or picture. Okay. That is, during that time, people began to pray to God in their human forms. That is, you know that Vishnu got 10 incarnations, avatars, and Krishna, then Rama and all, they took the human form in the earth, and we began to pray these human forms of the God. Okay, for example, in Christianity also it is like that. See, there is one God, there is only one God. Jesus Christ is the Son of the God who was born in the earth, isn't it? So that we could, that is, we are praying to God in His human form. Understand? So that is Saguna Bhakti. So what do you mean by Nirguna Bhakti? We will pray to an abstract form of the God. Okay, there is no idol, there is no picture of the God, there is no particular human form for the God. We pray to the God in an abstract form. That is, we believe that there is a supreme being there and we pray to them. See, for example, in certain churches and whenever we go to a church, we are mostly familiar with the idol of Jesus Christ, Mother Mary, etc. Isn't it? But in certain churches it is like that. They don't have any idols there. They don't pray to Jesus Christ or Mother Mary. They pray to only the supreme being. Okay, that is supreme God. There is no that is an abstract form of bhakti. That is Nirguna Bhakti. See, in here also in Ochira, one temple is there. There also there is no idol or anything like that. We just believe that Lord Shiva is present there and we pray to Lord Shiva. But there is no idol there. Okay, so that is Nirguna Bhakti. That is, we are praying to God in an abstract way. Okay, the abstract form of God is there and we pray to that particular God. Understand? That is the difference between Nirguna and Saguna Bhakti. Okay. See, Saguna included traditions that focused on the worship of specific deities such as Shiva, Vishnu and his avatars, that is incarnations and forms of the goddess or Devi. That is what I told you earlier. In the human form, we are praying to the God in their human form. Actually, we have never seen God as such, isn't it? But we have a vision. See, I have shown you certain pictures of Mahavishnu, Krishna and all. Do you think that is exactly how Lord Vishnu looks, or Krishna looks, or Jesus Christ looks? No, nothing. But we have visualized a picture of them in their human forms, isn't it? That is Saguna Bhakti. Now, Nirguna Bhakti, on the other hand, was worship of an abstract form of God. That is what I told you earlier as an example. That is, in certain churches and all, we don't have an idol of Jesus Christ or Mother Mary or any, or in church, in certain temples, there is no idol such as we usually pray. So, that is Nirguna Bhakti. Understand? Now, see, I have taken one, I will explain it in detail. See, Saguna and Nirguna form of Bhakti. Saguna Bhaktas. Example for Saguna Bhaktas. See, study this properly. Chaitanya, Tulasidas, Surdas, Mirabai. Okay. Examples for Saguna Bhaktas: Chaitanya, Tulasidas, Surdas, Mirabai. Okay. Now, Nirguna Bhaktas, Kabir and Guru Nanak. Examples for Nirguna Bhaktas, Kabir and Guru Nanak. Now, Saguna Bhakti, they believe in highly personalized God, awareness about dualism, but firm belief in oneness of two. See, we usually we don't worship Vishnu as such, isn't it? We worship Krishna or Rama. In north it is Rama, in south it is Krishna. Usually we pray to Krishna or Rama. That is the duality of that God. They are the incarnations of Mahavishnu, but we pray to the God in his human form. That is Krishna and Rama. Okay. Now, Nirguna Bhakti, strict commitment to impersonal nature of God, devotion of an individual soul to submerge itself into ultimate reality. So, see, this is the difference between Saguna Bhakti and Nirguna Bhakti. Did you understand what I am trying to say? I will read it once again. Saguna Bhakti is belief in highly personalized God, awareness about dualism, but firm beliefs in oneness of two. Okay. Whereas Nirguna Bhakti is strict commitment to impersonal nature of God, devotion of an individual soul to submerge itself into ultimate reality. That is the difference between Nirguna and Saguna Bhakti. Okay, did you get it? Now, we are moving towards the Alvas and Nayanas of Tamil Nadu. See, Alvas and this is in the Bhakti tradition. See, Alvas and Nayanas of Tamil Nadu. See, I told you in the initial stages itself, Bhakti movement started in South India, isn't it? Tamil Nadu and certain part of Kerala. Okay. So during the 6th century, some of the Bhakti movements were led by the Alvas and Nayanas. Alvas, Nayanas. That is, there was a division there. Some were Vaishnavites, some were Shaivites. That is, some people believed in Lord Vishnu, some people believed in Lord Shiva. Okay. The literal meaning of the Alvas is those who are immersed in devotion of Vishnu. So, who are the Alvas? They were the followers of Lord Vishnu. Alvas were the followers of Lord Vishnu. Understand? The meaning of the word Nayanas is those who were devotees of Shiva. So, Nayanas means the devotees of Shiva. Alvas means the devotees of Vishnu. Nayanas means the devotees of Shiva. See, don't mix it, okay? Alvas means those who believe in Lord Vishnu. Nayanas means those who believe in Lord Shiva. One mark you stay. So, Alvas and Nayanas of Tamil Nadu. Alvas believed in Vishnu. Nayanas believed in Lord Shiva. Now see. See these Alvas and Nayanas, they try to, see actually during that time, so many people, because of the atrocities in Hinduism, so many people went to Buddhism and Jainism. So in order to bring back the people to Hinduism, this Bhakti movement started. I told you that earlier, isn't it? Why did they start Bhakti movement? In order to bring back the people back to Hinduism from Buddhism and Jainism. And why did people went to Buddhism and Jainism? Because mostly people did not understand what is happening in Hinduism, because all the Vedas, Puranas, etc. were written in Sanskrit. All the mantras, everything was written in Sanskrit, which the common people did not understand. In the last class I told you that whenever we go to temple, this Brahmin priest, they chant lots of mantras which we don't understand even now. So at that time, nobody understood that. That is one reason. Then the other reason was the elaborate rituals in Hinduism. Okay. That is why this Bhakti movement started, that they tried to minimize all these things in Hinduism. Okay, they tried to minimize all these things in Hinduism. So, in order to bring back the people back to, see, I told you that many of the leaders were poets and they were singers. So, when they go to places and sing all these bhajans and all, people will get attracted to them and they will be the followers of these leaders. Okay, so they travel from place to place singing hymns in Tamil in praise of their gods. So these Alvas and Nayanas, they will go to certain places, and what they will do? They will sing the songs in praise of their own gods. That is, Alvas will sing songs based on Vishnu, and Nayanas, they will sing songs based on Lord Shiva. Okay. During their travels, the Alvas and Nayanas identified certain shrines as abodes of their chosen deities. Okay. Then while they were traveling from one place to another, they chose certain places so that they could put their deities. That is, whether it is Lord Vishnu, the idol of Lord Vishnu, or the idol of Lord Shiva, they used to find certain places so that they could place their idols and make temples there. Understand? So, initially they did not make big tall temples and all. They just put the idols in certain places, worshipped with flowers and all, and then they will move to from one place to another. And again in another place they will put their deity there, the idol of the deity there, and they will worship there for some time. Then afterwards they will move to another place. Then afterwards, after many years, certain kings, they wanted to build huge temples for these deities. Okay. So later, big temples were built at those places and developed as pilgrimage centers. So what did these Alvas and Nayanas do? They moved from one place to another, and while going in certain places, they will place certain shrines to put the idol there. They will put the idol there in certain shrines and they will pray there for some time, and then they will move to another place and find another place to make shrines there. Okay, all these were small places, but afterwards, that is later on, certain kings, particularly Chola kings, Chola rulers, they built very big temples in this particular place and developed these temples as pilgrimage centers. Understand? Only because of the patronage of this, you know about Buddhism, only because of the patronage of King Ashoka, Buddhism became this much popular, isn't it? So likewise here also, when Alvas and Nayanas, they put certain shrines, they made certain shrines. Later on, these places were built, in these places, temples were built by rulers or kings, and it was made pilgrimage centers. Understand? Now, According to, that is attitude towards caste. Next subheading is attitude towards caste. I told you that when people deviated from Hinduism to, that is that rigid Hinduism to another type of worship, they rejected caste system. Do you remember that in tantric worship and all, they completely avoided caste system and class system, as well as women, as well as other people could also be the followers. That is, lower caste people also, the so-called lower class people also could follow this tantric worship and all. Then, see, that is the importance in this bhakti movement. I told you that earlier only Brahmins could be the intermediary between the God and the people. But when bhakti movement started, it was not like that. That is, women as well as the lower caste people could become priests in their own temples. Okay, and they could also perform these rituals like the Brahmins did. So that was the importance. Okay. So according to some historians, the Alvas and the Nayanas started a movement of protest against the caste system, and the Brahmanas attempted to reform the system. See, when there was a very high movement against this caste system by certain people, that is, these Alva leaders and Nayanas, they were very popular among the people, isn't it? So people began to flock towards them. So, and these Alvas and Nayanas were completely against the caste system. So, because of that, Brahmins also, they also began to be more flexible. They understood that if they were rigid, if they are rigid, then people will move away from Hinduism. So, they also became flexible, less rigid now, because of the movement made by Alvas and Nayanas. Okay. The devotees came from different social backgrounds, such as artisans, cultivators, and even from the caste that were considered untouchables. See, now who were the devotees of this? Who were the devotees of this? That is, from different social backgrounds, that is, cultivators, artisans, as well as from untouchables also. Earlier only the Brahmin, Kshatriyas, and to a certain extent Vaishyas could do all these things, perform all these pujas and all, but now it is not like that. People from lower caste as well as those who were considered untouchables as well as women could participate in all these things. Understand? That is the main characteristics or importance of this bhakti movement. Compositions of the Alvas and Nayanas. See, the compositions of the Alvas and the Nayanas are considered to be as important as the Vedas. For instance, one of the anthologies of compositions of the Alvas, the Nalayira Divya Prabandham, this came for exam this year. Okay, one mark question. Anthologies, the composition of Alvas. Nalayira Divya Prabandham, 1 mark question, was described as the Tamil Veda. See, that was the question which came for the exam. The book which was known as Tamil Veda, Nalayira Divya Prabandham. And the text was significant like the Vedas that were used by the Brahmanas. So, this Alvas wrote a book called Nalayira Prabandha, which is known as Tamil Veda, and people considered it as equivalent as that of the Vedas written by the Brahmins. Okay, so which book is known as Tamil Veda? Nalayira Divya Prabandham. Okay, and this was known as Tamil Veda, and this was considered as the equivalent of Vedas written by the Brahmins. Did you get it? Now see, I told you that in earlier period, that is during the Puranic period and Vedic period and all, women were not considered important at all. Okay, but during this bhakti movement, it was not like that. See, lots of women devotees were there, and see this picture. See the picture of Andal. See, one of the striking features of these traditions was the presence of women. For example, there was a saint poet called Andal, a woman Alvar. See, this is Andal, the picture of Andal. See how beautiful she is. Okay, see, this was also one mark question which came for exam last year. Okay, her compositions were sung even today. So she wrote lots of poems about Lord Vishnu, and even now people sing her songs. Okay, like Meera bhajans. Meera wrote her poems for Krishna, Lord Krishna. Okay, she Andal wrote her poems for Lord Vishnu, and even now people sing these songs. Then another woman, that is Karaikal Ammayar. See her? A devotee of Shiva, adopted the path of extreme asceticism to attain her goal. So she, see, whenever we consider Shiva, we always take severe penance to get his blessings, isn't it? So Ammayar was also like that. She took extreme asceticism to attain her goal. She did not eat anything for so many months, and it went beyond years. She became so thin, only bones were there, but still she continued her fasting to attain moksha, to be one with Lord Shiva. This is her. See her picture, Karaikal Ammayar. So, if for exam one question comes like this, write the name of a woman who was an Alvar. You have to write Andal. Okay, this is Andal. And devotee of Shiva, women Nayanar. Okay, then you have to write Karaikal Ammayar. Karai KKAL Ammayar, AMMAIYAR. See, all these are one mark question. See, Andal and Ammayar. Did you see the pictures? Okay. Now again the sub heading is women devotees. See, this Karaikal Ammayar, her compositions were preserved within the Nayanar tradition. So she believed in Nayanar tradition, Andal believed in which tradition? Alvar tradition. Okay. These women renounced their social obligations but did not become nuns. See, all these women were from high caste. Okay, they were from Brahmin household or Kshatriya household. They renounced their social obligations but did not become nuns. Of course, they did not go for their palaces, their social backgrounds, etc. They denounced that, but they did not become nuns. Their presence was a challenge to patriarchal norms. What does that mean? Their presence was a challenge to patriarchal norms. What does that mean? During that time, between 8th century and 17th century, what was the role of women in the society? Nil, N-I-L, nil. That was the role of women during that society, isn't it? So what happened with these women, Andal and Ammayar, and of course Mirabai, they ignored all the social obligations, came out in the society, they wrote poems, they sung songs in front of a large crowd, which was not allowed during that time. And the role of women was that of a housewife, isn't it, during that time. So they did not want women to come outside their household. But these women, that is Andal, Ammayar, as well as Mirabai, they all renounced their social obligations and came outside and became leaders of the masses. Okay, which was against the patriarchal norms during that time. Did you understand that much? Now, see, opposition to Buddhism and Jainism. This is Buddha and this is Mahavira. Okay, Buddha and Mahavira. Okay, So the Sepoys, the Alvars and the Nayanas were opposed to Buddhism and Jainism. I told you in the initial stages itself, that is why did they start this Bhakti movement? So that people will come back from Buddhism and Jainism to Hinduism. Okay, that is why they started this Bhakti movement. So this Sepoys, that is the Alvars and Nayanas, they were completely against Buddhism and Jainism. The hostility is well marked in their compositions, particularly of the Nayanas. See, in their compositions made by this Nayanas and Alvars, but particularly Nayanas, they were deadly against Buddhism and Jainism. So, from their poems, we can understand the hostility towards Jainism and Buddhism. Historians say that this conflict was due to competition between members of different religious traditions for royal patronage. See, as I told you earlier, how did Buddhism spread this much? Because of the patronage of Ashoka, isn't it? As well as his successors. Okay, so why were these Alvars and Nayanas fighting with the Buddhists and Jainis? Because everyone wanted royal patronage. Only if they get royal patronage, what will happen? They can spread their religion. Okay, without royal patronage, they will not be able to spread their religion. Understand? So, Alvars and Nayanas, they were completely against Buddhism and Jainism, and in their poems as well as the writings, we can understand the hostility towards Buddhism and Jainism, particularly in the poems of Nayanas, we can understand that. Okay, why they were doing like that? Because they wanted royal patronage. Understand? Now, see, next we are going to study about the royal patronage. I told you earlier itself that Chola rulers, they made these shrines of these deities made by Alvars and Nayanas. They made them into big temples, isn't it? So that is what we are going to study now. Relation with the state, patronage of Chola rulers. The Chola rulers supported the Bhakti traditions and built temples for Shiva and Vishnu. Okay, Chola rulers, they were particularly about making these temples and all. I'll show you the pictures. Okay, they built temples for Shiva and Vishnu. Some of the magnificent temples for Shiva, such as temples in Chidambaram, Tanjavur and Gangaikonda Cholapuram, were constructed under their patronage. So before that, I'll show you these pictures. See, this is Brihadeshwara temple, Tanjavur. See how intricate the workings are. See the workings on the gopurams. See how large it is, how big it is. See this temple. I hope you can see this clearly. See the temple. See the work of art on those gopurams. Now, see this picture, Madurai Meenakshi temple. See this picture. This temple is in Madurai. Okay. So, Chola rulers made all these temples. See this. See the intricacies of the carvings. See this. How big that temple is. Okay, now we will move towards this. So, these magnificent temples were made by whom? By the Chola rulers. Okay, and because of the patronage of Chola rulers, these Alvars and Nayanas, they could do their preachings and all in a good manner. Okay. So the Chola rulers built temples often to claim divine support and proclaim their own power and status, and adorn those temples with stone and metal sculpture to represent the visions of the popular saints. So why did these Chola rulers made these temples? Of course, they were the devotees of Lord Vishnu and Lord Shiva. That is one thing. But another factor is that they wanted to show off their power and status. Okay, so when they build very big temples and all, people will understand how powerful they are, and their status in the eyes of the common people will grow, isn't it? So that is why they built this temple, not only because of power and status, but because they were the devotees of Lord Shiva and Lord Vishnu. That is another thing. But why they built this large temple, this much large temples, is that they wanted to show their power and status to the common people, and not only to common people but to other kings also. Okay. And they adorn these temples with stones, precious stones, semi-precious stones, and metal sculpture to represent the visions of the popular saints. Of course, these precious stones and semi-precious stones are not there in these temples. All have been taken by the British and other conquerors who came to India. But at that time, Chola rulers, they put lots of precious stones as well as semi-precious stones, so that they could show their power and status to the common people as well as the neighboring rulers. Understand? So only because of the patronage of these Chola kings, they could, Alvas and Nayanas could grow. Now, see this picture. See this picture, image of Nataraja. Okay. So, they made the spectacular representations of Shiva in bronze sculpture. Who made this bronze? That is this picture of bronze sculpture, Chola rulers. Okay. Say this. Even now, we are very familiar with this Nataraja Vigraha, isn't it? They were made by the Chola rulers. The Chola kings introduced the singing of Tamil Shaiva hymns under royal patronage, taking of the initiative to collect and organize them into a text that is called Thevaram. See, even though Chola rulers built temples of Lord Vishnu and Lord Shiva, mostly the Chola rulers were the devotees of Lord Shiva. So, they made lots of temples. See, Madura Meenakshi temple. Who is the deity there? The main deity was Meenakshi. Who is she? She is Parvati. Who is Parvati? Wife of Lord Shiva. So this Chola rulers made this temple for Lord Shiva. Okay, even though Parvati is considered as a very important goddess, we know that everyone considers Parvati as the wife of the principal deity, Lord Shiva. Understand? So, Chola rulers, even though they made temples for both Lord Vishnu and Lord Shiva, mostly they were the devotees of Lord Shiva. So they organized and collected poems of Shaiva hymns and made them into a text that is known as Thevaram in Tamil. What is it? Thevaram, T-E-V-A-R-A-M, Thevaram in Tamil. Now, according to inscriptional evidence, the Chola king Parantaka I, one mark question, okay, had constructed the metal images of Appar, Sambandar and Sundarar in a Shiva temple. So I told you that these Chola rulers were the devotees of Lord Shiva. So this Chola king Parantaka I, he constructed the metal images. See this image of Lord Shiva, isn't it? Nataraja Vigraha. Okay, he is dancing in this Vigraha. These sculptures were made by Parantaka I, the Chola ruler. Now, these were carried in procession during the festival of these days. So, whenever there is a festival in this temple, these bronze statues will be carried by the priest, whether it's a Brahmin or another from other caste, it's immaterial. They used to carry these idols in the procession. Okay. Even now in temples it is like that, isn't it? During festivals and all, this idol will be taken from the Garbhagriha and it will be paraded in front of the people. Okay. So these Chola kings, they started this tradition after making bronze statues and all keeping it inside the temple, and during festivals they will take out this idols and will carry it in the processions during festivals and all. Understand? So why this topic is important is that this bhakti movement got an importance only because of the patronage by the kings, particularly Chola rulers in South India. Okay. As you know, bhakti movement started in South India for the first time during which century? 8th century. Now, I have already shown this picture, Brihadeshwara temple in Tanjavur, then Madurai Meenakshi temple in Madurai. Okay, now see, we have studied about Bhakti movement, we have studied about Nayanas, we have studied about Alvas, we have studied about Tantric worship, we have studied that from the earlier deities, that is Agni, Indra, Soma, from these deities they have changed to Lord Vishnu, Shiva and the goddesses. Okay, now see another tradition, Veerashaiva tradition in Karnataka. We are going to study about the Veerashaiva tradition in Karnataka. See this picture, can you see this picture? This is Basavanna who started this Veerashaiva tradition. Can you see this picture? This is the picture of Basavanna who started this Veerashaiva tradition. Okay. Now, in which century they started this Veerashaiva tradition? They started it in 12th century. They started this tradition in 12th century. Okay. The 12th century witnessed the emergence of a new movement in Karnataka. See, actually I told you that the Alvars and Nayanas were from Tamil Nadu, isn't it? Southern part of India. This Veerashaiva tradition started in Karnataka by Basavanna. Okay. See, this Veerashaiva tradition was started by Basavanna, who was a Brahmin at that time. Then initially he was a Jaina and a minister in the court of Chalukya king. So who started Veerashaiva tradition? Basavanna. Who was he? He was a minister in the court of Chalukya king in Karnataka. Understand? Veerashaiva tradition was started by Basavanna. One more question. Okay, don't forget. Veerashaiva tradition was started by Basavanna in Karnataka. Who was he? He was a Jaina in his initial stages, and he was the minister of Chalukya, minister in the court of a Chalukya king. Okay. His followers were known as Veerashaivas, that is, heroes of Shiva. His followers were known as Veerashaiva, that is, heroes of Shiva, or Lingayas. I hope that you have heard about Lingayas, that is, wearers of the Linga. Okay. Lingayas continue to be an important community in the region today. See, even though Veerashaiva was famous, this tradition was famous in Karnataka. Now this tradition was only in Karnataka, nowhere else it is there. Okay, but in Karnataka still this Veerashaiva tradition is there. Or it is otherwise known as Lingayat. Another one mark is in Veerashaiva is known as Lingayat. The first one mark is who started Veerashaiva tradition, that is Basavanna. Okay, who was he? He was a Jaina and he was a minister in the court of Chalukya king. Okay, the second one mark question is the other name of Veerashaiva tradition, Lingayats, Lingayats, Lingayats. Don't forget. Now, they worship Shiva in his manifestation as a linga, and men usually wear a small linga in a silver case on a loop strung over the left shoulder. So, how can we understand whether these persons are Veerashaivites or Lingayats? They always carry a manifestation of linga on their left shoulder. They will put it in a small chain, in a loop, the small manifestation of linga, and wear it on their left shoulder. Okay, and Basavanna was completely against the caste system. He was completely against the caste system. He never believed idol worships. See, that is the importance of Veerashaivites and Lingaites. They never worship idols. See, I'll tell you later. I'll describe that later. Okay. Now, the Veerashaiva tradition in Karnataka. See, children, I think it's time now. Shall I stop? I don't want to stop, but I am going to stop now. Okay.